to Game Dev London podcast. I'm Roni Yosko, a new host at Game Dev London, who's here to bring you all three things indie dev. And joining me today is Alyx Jones, founder of Silver Script Games. Alyx has a very impressive portfolio in video games with some of the titles she's worked on being Elden Ring, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and the Final Fantasy Remake 7. She's won the Sound Hero Award at Game Dev Heroes and the Community Award at Guildford Games Awards. Alyx is also a BAFTA Breakthrough and a 30 under 30 MCV/develop. And this year, part of the Game Awards Future Class. We are here to talk about Alyx's new game, The Quiet Things, an autobiographical narrative game based on a real diary entries kept as a teenager. Alyx, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I don't know what to say after that intro. That's my entire life story.
I got it all out of the way. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've always worked in game audio. That's kind of what I trained in: creative music technology, then did a master's in music composition. And when I was younger, I was like, might be a rock star, but that didn't really pan out too well. And then I studied in Guildford, which has an amazing community in Guildford. Like, games is a big thing. So there was loads of game jams that I went to. So I got into game dev accidentally through trying to get a job in audio, and then ended up making my own games as well. So that's kind of like a rough background.
Cool. So your goal originally wasn't to be a game developer or in that field?
Yeah, like originally music was the one thing that I was really focused on, but it's very hard to break into. And the more I learned about different jobs in games and in audio, the more I kind of strayed around into different things and went into dialogue, and I dabbled in sound design. I don't think I was as good as sound design, so I stayed in like the dialogue and music branches more. But
Yeah,
found that I really enjoyed coding and things like that. So we learnt Max MSP, it was called then, but I think it's just called Max for Live now, perhaps with the Ableton plugin. And things like Super Collider, which are, for people who don't know, kind of audio programming things. So they have like visual scripting elements or like text code, and then from learning that and then transitioning into Unity and learning things in Unity and then in Unreal, lose my voice, in Blueprints, that kind of translated quite nicely from audio to games.
yeah, cool. Are you like mainly passionate about just like the music and dialogue stuff, or is it mostly dialogue? 'Cause I know that you used to work in the dialogue area quite heavily, right?
Yeah, so I was post-production lead at Liquid Violet, and that started from like a junior studio engineer position to then being, I think I did dialogue editing and then post-production coordinator and then post-production lead as I kind of went through all the stages. But it wasn't a job I knew about originally, and I think once I got into it, I really, really enjoyed it, and so I stayed for a long time. And I can bring all of that into my game as well, so there is quite a heavy focus on dialogue and sound, just because it's my background, so it lends itself quite nicely as a genre to the kind of things that I like. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Speaking of your game, since we're here to talk about it, we want to tell us a little bit about it. I gave a little small description, but a more in-depth one from you would be real cool.
Yeah, so it's my autobiography, and it's based on my diary. So I kept a diary, I don't know, I kind of sporadically between being a child and then a lot more as a teenager, as we all experience. There's a lot going on with like hormones, and especially in my life there was lots of stuff happening. And so in like counselling sessions and therapy, they always recommended writing things down. So that's what I did. But then I've got this massive backlog of stuff that I was like, I can't really write a book. I'm not like that way inclined, but I do like making games. So that kind of formed the basis for what I did. And I made the prototype for it when I was studying my master's in music, just to have something to put all the music to. But I then ended up pitching it to get funding and things like that. So it became a lot more than just a university project.
Nice. How long had you been like thinking about doing this game, or is it just kind of something that happened one day kind of thing?
Yeah, so, well, the prototype, that was maybe 2017, 2018. So that's 6 years ago now-ish. But I don't know. I didn't think I would necessarily make a game, but I think I wanted to share my story in some way, whether that was through music or whatever it may be. I think we kind of grew up in a time of MySpace and then Bebo and Facebook, so you kind of get used to sharing a lot of elements of yourself online a lot of the time, and so it became more of a natural thing to do. But when I was going through the stuff I was going through, like domestic violence and things like that, it was very much don't talk about it, don't tell anyone. That it's like a almost like a dirty secret that you shouldn't speak about, and if you do talk about it, you won't be believed. And so that was the kind of things that I couldn't talk about, but kind of behind the scenes, maybe to my friends, like within like private online profiles, I maybe did more and found that it wasn't necessarily that I'd done anything wrong or that no one believed me. And you kind of slowly start to realize that that was kind of abuse. Whereas when you're in it, you don't necessarily know that unless you're educated in that way. It was just always been there.
Yeah. Oh man, I just like got kind of chills hearing you talk about this kind of stuff because yeah, I had a lot of friends growing up. Just I don't know, there's something about South in the States that lend like, families to be not too kind to some kids, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Uh so yeah, I definitely understand that. Do you mind if we talk about a little bit about your past, or is that
of
not
course,
something
that's
that
fine.
you
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, do you mind explaining like the kinds of things that I'm assuming are in the game that you've experienced in the past?
Yeah, so it kind of starts off with my mum dying in the game. So I was only 8 when that happened, and then my dad didn't deal with it very well, and I can't really remember whether he was abusive prior to that or not because there's so much going on. And she basically went through years of chemotherapy and cancer treatment, and so half of my memory of that is kind of a bit blurry, so I don't really know. But definitely following that, he remarried really quickly, and there was a lot of domestic violence in the home, and I have brothers as well, and then another brother and a half sister that happened. So there was like 5 of us all experiencing that as children growing up, which is a bit hectic. And it touches on bits of it in the game. There's nothing graphic in it, but especially things like overusing like physical discipline, but in a way that like it's not really predictable when someone's gonna like spark. It's not like, oh, you've done something wrong, there's the punishment. It would be like random things. So it became very like hard to predict when that was going to happen. So like even now, I'm quite hypersensitive to things. Like it's a good thing and a bad thing because it makes you very sensitive to other people. But then there's a time where you like maybe turn that off a little bit. But yeah, so it deals with that. And then when I leave home, I originally kind of sofa surfed around. Social services basically didn't really want to deal with me because I was kind of 15, 16. So I lived in like a homeless shelter. I lived in like family placements that were organised by a charity. And then at that point, like there was a lot of sexual abuse as well because you're in such a vulnerable situation that it's very easy to take advantage of a 15, 16-year-old who has nowhere to go. So that deals with kind of like grooming and sexual abuse. Thankfully, it never went further than that one thing in terms of like it didn't escalate into trafficking, but it's still like the same kind of behavior patterns as people would do if they were going to traffic people, which is, I don't know, not really any games deal with that kind of thing, and I think it's important to talk about.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like hearing this like coming out of your mouth is kind of something like I was gonna say that I read this book recently. I actually have it here because I was looking at um your game. It's called Take Me With You When You Go. I found it in like the airport in Austin, and it's exactly about that about these two kids that get abused by their stepfather, and one
Mm.
of them at the very beginning runs away from home at like 15 around the age where like she's just about to end like high school in the States, and yeah, having to deal with like the abuse and like you said, like having to hide it all. It's like a secret, and like thinking that you've done something wrong and having to come to the realization that no, it's not you. You did nothing wrong because you're a child. There's nothing wrong that you could have done, basically. There's nothing you could have done to make the
Yeah.
situation better. And also touching on the subjects of also like even just mental abuse where people, kind of manipulate you and oh shoot, I was gonna mention something about thinking that like, you're just in your head about it and having to get to a place where you understand that I guess it's not you, it's them kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's even harder when it's people that you trust in your family or parents.
Yeah.
Like even your step parents could be in that position of trust where you never know any different and you believe that everything your parents say is definitely right and true. Whereas
Yeah.
if it's someone, if you've grown up in a relatively stable household and then someone else tries to do that, you already have like a basis of what's normal, whereas our
Yeah.
normal is like abuse. And so there's often a pattern of like partners and friends or the kind of people you associate with being similar because that's what you think is kind of normal.
Yeah, exactly. It's really nice that like I know like a lot of boomers are just like, oh, this younger generation's too soft, but like there is something to be said about having the option to go to therapy and really work through things so that you're, like you said, like not repeating history because there is trauma is hereditary, unfortunately, because it's your learned trait on how to treat people and how to grow up and all of that stuff. My best friend's a social worker, trained to be a social worker, and so she like sends me like all these links of like different things on like different traumas and this and that. It's all very interesting to read, but
Yeah.
my God, like people who experience that, I'm so sorry for what you went through, and
No,
thanks for making this game, honestly, to like you said, bring to light the situation that a lot of people go through because not a lot of people, thankfully, experience that, and it definitely needs to be brought to light. So.
I think sadly it's a lot more than you would think.
You
But it's
think,
that
yeah.
silence around it, yeah.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I can't
I
remember what
mean,
the exact stat was, but I think it was something like 1 in 15 people experience childhood
seriously.
abuse. That's like 2 to 3 people in every
Oh
classroom or
my
something like that. Like
goodness.
it's, I don't know what level that is, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. I wonder what the stats would be around different parts of the world as well, because I'm assuming,
Mm,
versus UK versus the States versus,
yeah.
I don't know, Japan. It'd be very interesting to look at. Um, anyways, I want to know, moving on from the super depressing stuff, what is there any kind of games that inspired you when making your game?
Yeah, I mean, I really like walking simulator style games. I know it's not for everyone, or it has a bit of a bad rep because of the brand walking simulator. But I think the first one I played was Dear Esther, and I must have been a student at the time. And for anyone who's not familiar with it, it I think it was a PhD project that they were looking to remove as many game mechanics as possible and still see how much they could take away and it still be a game. And it turns out you can take away quite a lot and it's still a game. So you essentially just move through an environment and dialogue triggers at various points, and there's no other level of interaction. Our game has more like pick up and inspect things and passwords and open drawers, which is more similar to games like Gone Home, which is like quite a good inspiration for our game, but I think it's getting on a bit now in age, so it's like an updated version. But that's a game where you walk through a house and you uncover the story as you go to different rooms and pick up whatever books, passwords, keys, things like that. So there's like minor puzzle elements to that in our game, but it's mostly about the narrative. And games like Life is Strange, although in terms of the superpower and rewinding time, it doesn't have any
Yeah.
resemblance to that. But stylistically, I think we quite like it's not super hyper real. It's like a painterly kind of in between thing, and they also deal with quite difficult subjects. Like in the first game, there's a girl that would jump off a roof if you didn't do the right interactions to like save her, and so it's quite like a heavy subject of suicide in there based on your choices as well. So you could ultimately save her or not, and you can't rewind time on that one, I don't think. Which I was like, right, I'm turning the game off and starting again.
Yeah, I remember playing that game, but I don't remember that bit. Because I remember really loving it. Might have just been because I selected all the right things and she didn't end up
Yeah,
jumping
maybe.
off the
I
roof.
don't know like whether everybody would come into contact with that or whether it's depending on what you do. Because there was like another
Right.
I was replaying it recently, which I'd totally forgotten. One of the girls had like an abortion, and this is like really early on in the game. It like deals with that
Oof.
straight away, just with like her computer, and you can talk to her about it if you kind of like find these things and rewind. And I was like, I can't even remember all these subjects that are quite like hard hitting that are being dealt with straight away by like teenagers in high school. So
Yeah.
it's more impressive than I remember.
Yeah. And that reminds me, like looking back, during my like high school and even middle school days, you'd hear about people, being like, oh, so and so is pregnant, like gossip going around and this and that. But it's not until I feel like you reach, unless you're just a very, very emotionally mature child, uh,
Yeah.
where you get to a certain age where you're looking back on those situations thinking, fuck, I should have been way more concerned about that person rather than just like kids are mean because of just pure
Same.
ignorance, man. Oh goodness.
But
Oh,
they're not responsible. They're just kids at that point. Like if you carry on behaving like
yeah,
that as an adult, that's a different thing. Like
it is a different thing. Yeah, no, that's very true.
everyone's processing their own teenage years at the
It,
same
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, you were listing off a few games, and that reminded me of the disappearance of Rachel Foster. I think that's the name of the game. Um,
Oh, I don't know that one. Interesting.
Let me see if I can find it. Disappearance of Rachel. Maybe I got the name wrong. It could have been. Oh, the suicide of Rachel Foster. Oh, right, yeah.
Okay.
And that one's very heavy as well, where it kind of
Mm.
like you said in your examples where you walk through this house and it's just like little interactions like, oh, you have to turn the camera angle just right because now she's taking a picture. But it's just like little voices in the background. You don't interact with anyone. It's just going about a home and kind of this narrator in the background is reliving the different moments and you hear like kids playing and one thing, and then like maybe little chats and silhouettes going on, but nothing, yeah, no interactions with people. So yeah, kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah. I quite
Yeah,
like when you strip back a lot of stuff because it makes you focus more on that. Whereas in other games,
yeah,
when there's a load of gameplay, you might just be tempted to skip through it all. But
yeah,
when you know that it's something you should be focusing on, you kind of appreciate it a little bit more.
yeah. It's like you mentioned how your favorite games are kind of like the game you're producing, and my favorite
Mm.
game is kind of lie in that genre too of like point and click adventure games with puzzles and basically what you described
Yeah.
with like heavy narrative as well, which I think is another reason why I was so interested in your game whenever I first saw it. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is right up my alley. It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely
yeah,
wanted to make the kind of game that I play. And people
yeah.
say maybe you shouldn't, but
I mean, how is it going? Are you, because you said you're 6 years into this, is that right?
well, I started it as a student and then I pitched a few things as a graduate and didn't get anywhere, and so I then just like dropped it for 5 years and was just doing my career and working on all the games from like a AAA perspective, which takes up 100% of your time all the time.
Yeah.
um, but we've been doing it just over a year, like properly with a team, not just me faffing around with things. And we switched from Unity to Unreal as well, which was kind of like just remaking everything that I'd originally put in the prototype, but better. Because the prototype that I pitched was purely stuff you could buy on like the Unity asset store in terms of like the interaction system and the art assets, because they're things that I didn't really have the skills to do. So my focus is always the audio. But then when we got the UK Games Fund prototype grant, that was last January, and you basically get that over 6 months, I think, to create a proper demo prototype of the game, which we're pretty much finished with now. So we've been showing that at various events, and that's a lot different from where it started. So I would say we've been working on it properly since last January, but it's
Okay,
existed
cool.
in other capacities before. Yeah.
And how large is the team? And I'm assuming it's just a bunch of freelancers, or are you guys like specific full time or?
Yeah, so everyone's contracted on like regular part-time hours. I can't stretch to full-time because indie dev. But yeah,
Fair enough.
basically there's 7 of us, and apart from Kirsty, who's the casting and voice director, whereas that's the kind of job that you jump in when needed and jump out again because
Yeah.
there's not necessarily end-to-end recording, but everyone else pretty much works on it for like regular part-time hours each week, which is quite nice actually. It's a bit less stressful than being constantly on calls like 10 till 6 or something, so it's quite good. And then you can share the GitHub pushes reasonably well.
Yeah.
It's not just like, can you get off the project? I need to do something.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
cool
there's
that.
there's there's me running it, Kev sound designer, 3 artists, and a like tech artist lighting crossover, and Kirsty, our voice
Cool.
director. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I didn't know that Christy was helping you out with your game. That's really cool. Yeah. And I was gonna ask about the voice acting and how you kind of went about doing that because obviously that's your background as well.
yeah,
And I'm assuming you knew quite a few actors because you also go to BAFTA games and or
yeah,
meetups and stuff.
yeah. Like working in a voiceover studio, you naturally get involved in that. And I was an engineer originally, so I was used to being in the sessions as a junior before COVID happened, and there was no more in-person recording for a little bit. But I'm a lot more familiar with editing people's voices than being in the sessions, I suppose. But Kirsty, as someone who knows that better, I wouldn't try and cast just because I know people. It has to be the right person for the role, and especially some of the roles are quite young, so they're borderline. Like the characters are actually maybe 15, 16, but the actors are naturally past 18, but they have to sound younger. So there's a limited talent pool for that because everyone
Yes.
grows.
Yes. And
So
also contracts to go with it as well.
yeah, we only
Oh.
have one child voice actor, and there's all the like getting a child license for that and having a chef around and making sure all of that's taken care of. So that was enough. I think one was enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. We have in case anyone doesn't know in the who's watching, I work at a rival studio to what you worked at a while ago. Yeah, we had this one girl, her name is Coco Lefko. I don't know if you've ever met her, Coco Lefko Green, but whenever I first met her, she was under 18 and she would like come into our studio and we'd have to like walk her all the way to King's Cross
Oh wow.
uh, because her parents were like, "Oh, she's been doing it for long enough, and we trust you guys." So she just walk her over there and she'll
It's
be
like,
fine. We're
yes,
like,
but the paperwork.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly." Yeah, um, yeah, yeah. I was actually gonna ask if that was a real child voice actor as well. So how old is she? Is she 15 or
I
what?
think so. There's basically like the young childhood, which is kind of an 8-year-old. Um, the the character's 8, but I think Elsie is 10, 11. So she's a few years older, but she's still quite young, and she sounds
Oh,
sweet.
okay. Yes, she does. Who's the lead voice actress? I know there's an older woman, yeah.
Yes. So yeah, for me, from the ages of kind of like teenage up, maybe like 13, 14, Emily takes over. So she's called Emily Burnett. She
Ah, yes.
was in Hollyoaks and the what's the Tracy Beaker spin-off called, The Dumping Ground, which I quite liked. It was a coincidence, but it's helpful to have someone who's used to dealing with those kind of kids in care storylines because it
Yeah.
lends itself quite well to that. So that wasn't a pre-requirement for the job, but it was nice to have. But
Yeah.
I think she's 25, so she's still like a good few years older than the character would be. But
Okay.
we work a little bit with aging the voice like younger, but not too heavily.
Yeah, because she does sound right in the pocket. It was very good casting on
Good casting.
everyone's part. Yeah. Also, did I sneak a little bit of Dave Jones in there as
Yeah.
well? Yeah, I thought so. Good old
It's such a
Dave.
different role for him, bless him.
Yeah.
Like completely different. But he's
If anyone,
wonderful.
yeah, if anyone doesn't know Dave Jones, he's in the big Baldur's Gate 3 game. With what's the name of the character that he plays? I can't remember.
Halcyon.
Yes, yeah, yeah. The bear guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Dave. Oh, Dave. Um, yeah, well, so we mentioned this briefly, but I was wondering, what kind of games do you personally like playing? Because
Ooh.
we touched on this very briefly, but maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, I play a huge range of stuff though.
Yeah.
Like I grew up with things like Pokemon, anything that was on Game Boy Color. We had a Game Gear, which was like a big old chunky thing that's kind of similar to the Mega Drive, like it had Sonic on it, but it didn't have
Okay.
any audio. It was broken, so I just played Sonic silently for a long time.
Oh my. That's the best
And
part of
yeah,
the Sonic games, though.
I
It's the
know
audio track.
it works like 1 in 20 times. So sometimes as
Was it
opposed
just
to
like
Sega.
the back of it was like broken or something, or was it
I
did
think it
you
was
just not
like
have a cable, or?
the speakers in the Game Gear, just like the cables are broken or something. I
Oh,
don't
was
know.
it
It's
handheld?
fucked. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
They were
okay, okay.
like they kind of look like a Game Boy Advance, but really fat, big
Right.
situation.
Okay. 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 I've
But yeah,
actually
I mean, I
never.
played a shitload of random games like that, and then more. into things like Assassin's Creed as like the console things, and Final Fantasy. Naturally played like 10, I think was my first one, which some people would be like, oh, that's so late, so young. But
I mean,
yeah,
I've not played any like Zelda games. I've not
yeah,
like the first Zelda game that I ever played was probably Breath of the Wild, and then I finally went back to like Wind Waker, and I still have yet to finish or even really get into a Final Fantasy game. The only one that I've managed to
yeah.
get into is the MMO.
I don't
Like,
think
what are
I've
you
finished
doing?
any. I think I've got close.
Yeah. Have you taken a look at Final Fantasy VII? Because I remember you worked on that. Do you have a quick
Yeah,
key
well,
for it or?
we thankfully got a copy, so I was able to play it a little bit. But I
Very
think
good.
I've maybe got a few hours in and then got stuck with something, and it's time to play it as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Is your main kind of go-to just like super narrative heavy kind of games then or story based?
Yeah, I mean, I like something to get your teeth into. It doesn't like I play things like Pokemon Unite as well, which is an awful multiplayer game which has no story whatsoever. But equally, things like Diablo, I played the entirety of Elden Ring after having edited all the dialogue for it, so I've experienced it all doubly.
A different kind of brutal. Oh
Yeah,
gosh. Oh,
but I
yeah.
like anything like fantasy. I grew up watching Lord of the Rings and things like that, so any games that feel slightly like fantasy sword fighting-y, I'm probably up for. But I don't think there's much stuff I wouldn't play. I mean, I'm not very good at horror because I'm a scaredy cat, but I enjoy things like Until Dawn. I just need the windows, like the curtains open so I can see daylight.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I was trying to play Left 4 Dead, no, Last of Us 2, and every single time the zombie scene came up, I just like threw the controller at my partner. I was like, you do this. I'm just gonna sit here and hide for a second. Yeah.
Is it done yet?
Yeah, basically. Just like, oh man. Let's see. What have I not asked you? Oh yeah, this is a good question. So going back to the work that you used to do for Liquid Violet, I was really interested to know because as someone who works in the dialogue production scene myself and also wanting to make their own game, how was your journey in transitioning from what you did at Liquid Violet to full blown? Now you're making your own game, you have your own indie company going on, you're the boss, you're the big boy, basically. And you've also had you like had some prior experience working with like inside of a development company
Mm,
as like Liquid Violet's a third party company, right?
yeah,
Um, so they don't actually get to do any of the implementation or anything like that. So now you're kind of in charge of that whole thing. Tell me a little bit more
yeah.
about that whole thing, yeah.
I mean, my main job for the last 5 years was Liquid Violet, but I did freelance work as well, directly with clients. But again, wouldn't implement it necessarily. Like back in the day when I guess I took a year between my undergraduate and my postgrad, so I kind of worked a bit and did teaching during that, and I think that was the time. Sorry, where I was working on. These are games that like never got released, and it's quite common to do that kind of thing, especially when you're starting out. Is you put loads of time and effort into a game, maybe get paid for it a little bit, and then the game just never comes out, and so you've got credits that never will be. But for those kind of games, I definitely did like all the music and sound design and implemented it with Wise and things like that. But in terms of a kind of official game that's actually come to release, I've never been on this side of it before. But I think, especially the grant we got from Innovate, they're quite supportive of like young innovators and female leaders because it's not a very common thing to see young people necessarily pushing their companies because people don't trust them because they're young. Doesn't mean they don't have the exact same skills. And the same for women, even for myself. I can't say that I ever would have considered myself an entrepreneur. Like, it's just a weird word that to me is just like white dudes in suits in the mid 20s, maybe late 30s, I don't know, who are on yachts and stuff. So it's not like, it's not a thing that I related to or thought I could be a business owner. And still now, like, I wouldn't call myself a CEO because it seems like jarring with who I am. I'm just like, I'm a founder, that's fine. But Yeah, so it doesn't matter that maybe I've not got experience in every area. I've kind of definitely seen games from like Elden Ring was years from start to finish, even though it's very specifically in the dialogue pipeline. I kind of have an idea of how that goes, and yes, I don't see the stuff either side of that, but equally working on game jams and things like that, you get good at rapidly prototyping stuff, and the game that we're making isn't that long. So in terms of mechanics and length, it's like a big game jam in a way. Yeah, I mean, like it's not a thing that I saw myself in a position, and it's not, I don't know, like growing up, there was some things like, there was a thing at school called Young Enterprise where you made a business and like did that as a team, but we just made badges. So it's not really the same. But that's the only experience I ever had of anything similar, of like running a business or even being in a position of being considered that was an option. Like you do the careers quizzes at school, and I don't know about now, but being an entrepreneur or starting your own company is just like never explored as an option. It's just not thought about. And I don't think it's only for people who have like capital or rich people. Like I don't really have much money to lean on. It was all like through raising money through grants. But game development is even harder than some other businesses because you don't have a product for years, and so you to work on it. And then can you imagine like opening a restaurant and going, well, we're not going to serve any food for the first 2 years, and
Yeah.
then we'll start bringing in some money. So it's such a like different kettle of fish that you need money to be able to make the product and then sell. But I don't know, the more I learn about it, the more it's cool. And I probably would have loved to do something like that if I'd thought about it earlier. It's just
Yeah.
hadn't really crossed my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also think about like, oh, to start your own company, you need like tons of capital. At least that's how I see it in my head. But really, you just need like, well, at least for a game development team, you just need a good concept and a good enough pitch, I think, for people to want to kind of support you with that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so
even with funding, there's things like prototype funds that you don't have to have much of a kind of existing product. You just have to be able to articulate your idea and prove that you can deliver it. So, however that is for yourself, like it doesn't really matter who you are or how old you are. If you have something that you think would work, I think there's opportunities out there at least.
yeah. Did you think that your background kind of helped you with like your credentials, I suppose, for convincing people, or is it not really that helped sway people?
Yeah, with some, especially like if you were going to go down the publishing route, like we haven't, we've solely rely on grant money and crowdfunding. But they, I think, for example, when I'm a graduate, I've got no credits under my belt, no proof that I could possibly make a game really. And so even just having a couple of years getting credits in the studio, I think helps a lot, even if it doesn't necessarily change what your skill set is. It changes how viable you are as someone that they could invest in. So it does help. And I think things like the BAFTA breakthrough really helps because people listen and perk up a little bit when they hear things like that. And so
That's true.
having backing of some awards or some kind of things that just prove that you're a good person in the industry and you know what you're talking about a little bit is helpful. I don't think it's a necessity, but I think having some experience, even if it's you've released an indie game with a team or you've worked on your own solo project as a student and released that, whatever that looks like for each individual might be different, but it definitely helps to have some experience in something.
Yeah. And is this the first time that maybe you're not doing the one actually implementing things, or like creating assets or, coding, but I'm assuming you have some kind of hands in those pots as well to help out.
Yeah. So basically everything in the game I've made in Unreal, like I've done it through blueprints. I don't do the art assets because that's just too much for me to learn. So that's why we have so many artists and not a lot of anything else, because they can actually do what I can't. All the
Yeah.
audio stuff, putting that in, I can do that, go to the studio recording sessions and edit that and put it in. Kev does all the implementation of sound design, but there will come a point where we'll need a programmer, especially for things like optimization and like shipping to platforms, because I've not done that personally from Unreal. So that is stuff I'd need like consultation or help with. But yeah, generally we're quite a small team, and so it's a bit of a like wear 10 different hats and do a bit of game design, do script writing, create the things in Unreal, implement everything, get it working, and then
Yeah, yeah.
break it and fix it again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What's been your favorite thing to learn during this entire process?
To be fair, I'd never used blueprints in Unreal until this project. I'd always been in Unity, and I think using like C# as a code base is limiting for me because I don't understand programming that fully to be able to write it from scratch. So I'd mostly take code that someone else has written or like in forums and then change it to work how I wanted it to. Whereas Unreal, I've got to a point maybe within like the first 3 to 6 months, there's like quite a steep learning curve. And now I can kind of like think of what I want to do and work it out myself without having to like, I mean, still have to Google what certain blueprints are called or whatever it might be because it's like a huge database of stuff. But it's quite cool thinking of something and then making it happen to the like you're like, oh, I can actually do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been slowly teaching myself how to code. I have this like Python,
Nice.
how to learn Python book because I'm just like, I go through all these tutorials on how to code and I'm just like, what does an if statement mean? Why are things located the way that they're located? And this book is explaining it all. But yeah, once you have those foundations, I'm assuming, did you have those foundations actually before jumping into this project?
I've done loads of like online courses over the years. I think especially with when I was making it for my master's portfolio, I was learning how to use code or what it was.
Right.
I don't I don't know if I would be able to code things fully from scratch. Like I couldn't really jump into like the C++ code and do anything, but within the blueprints, I feel reasonably comfortable now. But text-based coding from scratch is a whole nother thing. But game
Yeah.
dev's so accessible now that you don't necessarily need to. You can get quite far without it and then get someone to help you where you get stuck, which is what we've been doing pretty much.
Yeah, cool. So I'm assuming because of the amount of time you've been in the industry too, that you have quite a large pool of people that you can kind of go to and be like, hey, we're having this trouble. I know that you specialize in this. Could you give some advice on that kind of
Yeah,
thing? Yeah. So
I
it's always
think
nice.
networking for like 10 years worth of networking maybe helps a lot. And especially whatever your discipline is, network outside of it because you'll meet interesting people and learn so much
Yeah.
different things from them as well. And you can do like skill swaps. You might be like, oh, I could edit your dialogue if you could make this art cover for something, whatever it may be. Like there's so much room for collaboration. It's not
Absolutely.
always about money. Yeah.
Yeah, no. That's why whenever I tell people about networking, it's like make friends. Just be fun, nice,
Yeah.
be fun, just have a good time. That's all you gotta do.
I don't know
Don't
if I'm
put
even
too
that
much
fun.
pressure.
I'm just nice.
I feel like nicety comes with fun, you know?
Yeah, let's go with it.
Definitely less pressure with it for sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is another question. I know that you've been to a few conferences already. Are you planning on guys going to other conferences this year? I'm assuming to get publishing might be a next step, is that right? Or up in the
Like,
air?
yeah, the difficulty with publishers is it's a really hard time in the industry to get someone on board, and it's also such a specific game that I'm not super willing to give up like a large chunk of either what goes into it because publishers could have their opinions on like style or content and things like that, and it's such a personal project in this situation that it might not be right for publishers.
Right.
Um, I would personally prefer to self-publish. If we get to the point where we run out of money or a publisher is the right fit for us, then maybe that would be something to explore. But it's not something that I've gone wildly into because it might be a waste of their time if they're not the right people. We've done things like the big indie pitch, but again, I think it's such a difficult environment to do like a speed pitch of such a deep subject to be like, this is a game about trauma and abuse in like 5 minutes. Show me your demo, and yeah, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily suit the environment very well.
Yeah, yeah. I find that with some games in particular, you have to really kind of delve deep into the game to actually get the
Yeah,
full understanding of it. It's like reading like a couple pages in a book and being like, well, I know the entire book. When it's like, no, wait, no, there's so much more content there, please. Yeah, yeah.
but
Especially with
yeah,
those types of
events.
games too.
Yeah, things like conferences we do a lot. Like we showed the game at Guildford Games Festival. We've done a couple last year, and we'll definitely do more this year. Kirsty's doing a talk at GDC about the
Oh, very
game, which is
nice.
really super cool. I can't afford to go there. It's probably costs like 2 to 3 grand for one person to get out there from here. So
Yeah,
sad times. But anything
yeah.
UK based, and I'm gonna go to develop Reboot Blue, the one in Croatia, this year. But
Oh,
that's
okay. Oh,
not
yeah.
not related to the game. Just cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, Croatia is a stunning, beautiful place. Whenever I see pictures of it, and yeah, I was looking at that as well. Whenever I was doing some work for my work on finding out which events we're going to this
Mm,
year. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely that one's on the list for sure. Are you planning on hitting up like Gamescom or?
I've never been to Gamescom actually. I feel like
Oh,
it's a good one to do. Yeah.
it is really, really, really fun. They have a humongous indie dev space as well. An
Mm,
entire like floor with like probably football size kind of floor
nice.
just filled with indie developers. It's insane. I would highly
That sounds good.
recommend if you have like a good prototype to show people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice, nice. I will look into it.
Cool. Well, winding down a bit, already 40 minutes, I believe, into this, which is time has flown by. Um, my last question for you is, what are your next steps, and what would you like people to know, listening as well?
What would I like them to know?
Yeah,
Gosh,
either about yourself, the game, or what you've got next going on, or
I don't even know. I think it's kind of a difficult time in the industry at the moment with, I don't know, 20k layoffs now, probably.
yeah,
So it's been tough for me as well. I was laid off in December, but I feel in a lot better place now a couple of months down the line, and there will probably be people going through that now, back like I was a few months ago. And I think, regardless of what the people in power do with their money and capitalism and all that crap, that there probably is still a path for you, and it's okay. Like, things happen, and I think there is space for everyone. And like, if there isn't, you kind of have to make it sometimes. Like, I might not have gone full time with my game, or potentially even managed to secure extra funding if that hadn't happened. So there's a silver lining to it, even though it was rubbish at the time. So hopefully something positive for people who might be struggling.
yeah. Yeah, I remember one of my professors way back when always told me, he was just like, just keep doing it. You'll
Yeah,
have your big break. Just keep doing it. Because other people are gonna have this be in the same boat and they'll bail out, but you won't
yeah,
because you're
exactly.
gonna keep going. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the only way to guarantee that you fail is to quit. Otherwise, the rest is up to you,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Oh, goodness. Those are good words to end on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a Game Dev London podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Feel free to let us know in the Discord channel how you liked it and in any social media channels of your choice. And see you next time, guys.